And that sounds relatively minor, but actually it really affects your life. You can't go into a supermarket down that aisle without having a reaction. So the lovely lady I seen in Buckinghamshire really made me think, oh, this is really great. We'll have to keep coming. And then she had to stop working for personal reasons for 6 months. And I did see a big difference in them. So then I thought I'd have to find someone else. And I couldn't. So I got in touch with the company she used in Canada. And they trained me. And initially, I just wanted it for my own family. And it grew from there. The other families with children similar or who experienced some sort of neurological issue asked would it help, and I said, oh, absolutely, let's try. At that point I didn't have any clinical experience, although I'd been trained, and I have a peer group where I'd hear some great reports of people. So I've always been dead honest about how much commitment you need to do to get the neurofeedback.
Yes.
And the biggest benefit for me having non-verbal autistic children was that you're kind of limited in what interventions you can put in to help them. So for their anxiety, we couldn't really do talking therapy, or their motor skills were so poor, so we couldn't do art therapies. Right. But with neurofeedback, it trains the unconscious part of the brain, and it can even train your brain when your children are sleeping. So that's why I kind of bought the unit myself, because my youngest son was really, really difficult to sit still for the 33.5 minutes. I mean, he's fine now. So that, fast forward a year after buying it, and people were coming and finding me, I thought, oh, I'll start my own little business and practice, because I was trained and licensed, etc. And that's when I met you, and we started at the Wellbeing clinic in Solihull. So we've had many people be able to find us now, and having that option available in the West Midlands has been surprising for so many people, because a lot of people come to me after realising they don't have to travel to London anymore. So that's it in a nutshell, really. And here we are, 7 years later. So
So the first place that you really tried it out was with your own children, and they were quite young. And it was ASD, you were saying, autism spectrum disorder they were struggling with. So that's really interesting, because neurofeedback is often very much associated with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. But of course, the more I read into it, actually it has utility much beyond ADHD. But your entry into it was through children with ASD.
Yes, that's right.
Which is interesting. So do you work quite a lot with children or adults, for that matter, with ADHD, or is there quite a lot with ASD as well?
Well, many of the children I see with ASD also have the comorbidity of ADHD or ADD.
Okay.
So they do go hand in hand. But excuse me a second. The thing about neurofeedback, it's agnostic. No diagnosis is needed. It's essentially training the central nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system, to be in harmony rather than stuck in sympathetic fight or flight. So once that's balanced, the knock-on effect for so many symptoms alleviate. And so that's the essence of neurofeedback, is to just get that brain balance in. It's so effective with ADHDs because the focus element is such a challenge for people with that diagnosis. And that's where having that balance through allows children to be in the now rather than thinking of the future. And when they're present and in the now, they can understand cause and effect. They can understand consequences. When you live in the future part of your brain, you don't get those elements of life forces, if you like. So just balancing your sympathetic and parasympathetic element allows the brain to get back on the track of the blueprint of neurodevelopment. And that's where it is. It's resetting back to center. Okay, start again. This is how your brain should develop, because there's been some derailment. So it's basically putting them back on track for that. And I think with ADHD, the reason it's been so successful is in the FDA in the US. I've done the trials between Ritalin and neurofeedback and found neurofeedback just was more effective, relatively small percentage points. So I generally say as effective, because, with significant differences, it's up there with it.
That's pretty huge, Fiona, because, methylphenidate, Ritalin, it's an amphetamine-based medication that's used for people with ADHD.
Yeah.
So the trials found that neurofeedback was not only equally effective, but in some cases more effective.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing, isn't it? So
is.
some of the videos and case studies that I've been looking at, because I've been trying to do a bit of research myself around neurofeedback, and what I've heard, so that people get a picture of it, you tell me if this is what neurofeedback looks like.
Okay.
So there might be a screen with some sort of visual stimulus, and there are some electrodes that are attached to parts of the scalp.
Yeah.
And you, essentially the person that's watching, because there's some sort of, and you'll go into the technicality maybe, but the way that the brain waves are being read, you can influence the picture. So how slowly it goes, how vibrant it is, how loud it is, how quiet it is, the shape, movement, so on. So I've seen children sort of using spaceships that are kind of moving through some tunnel. But the idea is that you are given more control over the picture if you have brought your mental state into a calmer space. And that's what gives you that feedback and almost retrains your brain. Now, that's a very lay person sort of description. Am I along the right lines? Is it something like that?
Yes, you're not far off. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought it up, actually, because there are two very good horses in the neurofeedback stable. Now, what you've just described is a linear classical neurofeedback, where you may, I don't do that one, but I do like it. It's very good. And what happens there is that you're sitting down, you're going to have a protocol where someone will have done a brain map of your head, knowing what areas you need to train up or train down. So the software will have figured out that your, say, I don't know, beta brain waves aren't in harmony with the rest of your brain waves. So there'll be a computer program, and when your beta brain comes into play and they can see that, you'll get rewarded. And so you go, oh yeah, so everyone's going, yeah, beta, do it up. So it up trains it. With that neurofeedback, it's linear, it's classical, it's where the therapist will retrain or re-put your brain back onto that map. That can be difficult for children who can't watch a screen for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, or someone who has other issues that needs that concentration. So I use a system called Neuroptimal, which has the same sort of software. However, we don't require the person to do anything. I.e., they can be asleep, they can close their eyes. We do have a screen, but the screen is very like watching a goldfish bowl in a dentist. It's not going to get your teeth sorted, but it may calm you just to watch it. The feedback is actually through the music or the audio. And every time there's a turbulence detected in the brain, because exactly as you've said, the sensors are on the scalp. We've got a Z-amp, which is amplifying all of the hertz and electrical activity that's happening in the brain. 200 pieces of information a second are going through. It's a live EEG. So when it goes through the software, and I've got to say, for all neurofeedback people, the expertise is in the software, not the trainer. I hate to say it because people think I'm super clever, but actually the software is super clever. And it picks up any turbulence every second. And at that exact moment, it gives the feedback to the brain. That feedback is really, really gentle because you're listening to the music and you just hear a tiny interruption. For people of my age, it sounds like a little scratched record. For younger generations, it might look like an iPod out. So you're sitting there, you're just listening to the music. You're not doing anything. You can read a book. You can close your eyes. And that tiny piece of auditory information allows neurofeedback accessibility to those whose focus wouldn't be there for playing that computer game and having to concentrate, to be allowed their brain to be, I don't want to use the word manipulated, but physically trained into its way. So when you then get all of this auditory interruption feedback, your brain then processes. And one of the tenets of neurofeedback is that it works on the premise that we're always trying to recover ourselves. However, we may be sabotaged or we don't have the information required to recover into a healthy mind, body, spirit, if you like. So Neuroptimal feedback basically holds up a mirror for your brain to say, oh, that wasn't helpful actually. So when I look in the mirror and I see that I've got, I don't know, spinach in my teeth, I choose whether or not I remove the spinach or actually that really suits me, which probably wouldn't. So that's exactly what's happening in your brain at that point. So each neurofeedback session is a session within itself. So you don't need to complete a 12 or 20 session protocol. You can stop at any time because it's meeting your brain exactly where it is in that session at that point.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes sense.
That does help, yeah. It's a little bit, the analogy then, the spinach and looking in a mirror, spinach in your teeth, looking in a mirror, that's a nice, simple analogy. Is another one that it's almost like, when we train a muscle, and we sort of, we fine tune that muscle, don't we? It's strength, it's stamina, it's the way it works. So in a way, this is kind of doing something when you didn't want to use the word manipulate, but it's almost strengthening a healthier process within the brain, a healthier state of being in the brain. And what has been the impact? So you've experienced it in your children. How do you think it's helped them?
Well, both my children are diagnosed, and they're still on the spectrum, because I get that question all the time. And yes, they are still on the spectrum.
It doesn't cure them of
no, not at all. It just helps them with some of the comorbidities that can come along with it. For example, focus, because they're both clever, creative boys. So that part of their personality is just enhanced. They both can sleep well. They both follow instructions well. They both got social, interactive relationships. Those were the things I really wanted for them. And one of my boys also was diagnosed with a comorbidity called demand avoidance, or pathological demand avoidance. And that was really tricky for him. And now with the right language, he can take instruction and he can follow instruction. And we haven't had to medicate. And I've said it before, I'm not anti-medication at all, because sometimes it's absolutely the right thing to do. We haven't hit puberty yet, and I know that can be a particularly rocky road. I'm hoping that we've done enough work to get through that. But they're both enjoying a full education, and they're enjoying life, really. And we've got a really nice family life now, which we can enjoy. We can go to the cinema with one person and two children, whereas before we would have needed to have so much more support around to keep them safe. And they have a sense of danger. So that was something that I really wanted to make sure that they could, have, whereas before they just didn't. So all of those things, I think that would be useful to anyone with children that are struggling in those areas. But they're still fabulous little boys. So they're like them on a good day, most days. So it's
and how old are they now, Fiona, if you don't mind me asking?
12 and 11.
12 and 11, wow. So some real good outcomes. I mean, it's helped them in all sorts of ways. I mean, I was looking at a few case studies, and so somebody was saying that they had a child who was school refusing, couldn't tell a coherent story about her day, and after neurofeedback, they were able to tell a story from start to finish and with coherence. So that was something that somebody shared. I kind of pulled a few case studies, and you may have others you want to add. So we had something, an adult with bipolar disorder, diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and attention deficit disorder, ADD, without the hyperactivity. And what this person was saying was, after a few months of neurofeedback, this person became able to finish novels, express herself more clearly, and moods became more stable. So we're coming out of, we're talking about ASD, ADHD, But in your experience, can it help with pretty much, a mood disorder or an anxiety or maybe even a trauma?
Oh,
Do you think it's helpful in those
yeah,
areas?
trauma especially. And a lot of people find me because they've read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Obviously, you've heard of it because it's so famous in our world. And there's a whole chapter in there about neurofeedback and PTSD. It's
Okay.
particularly useful for people who can't access talking therapy for whatever reason. They just can't talk about their trauma.
Well, Fiona, I've worked in psychology for 23 years, and there certainly are situations where everybody wants somebody to have therapy, whether it's a judge or a parent or a partner, and some people do struggle for one, whether it's an issue of trust or whether it's about the capacity to reflect on yourself emotionally, the language and vocabulary, So there are so many situations where absolutely talking therapy just doesn't reach somebody. So sorry to interrupt you, but carry on. You were saying there are situations where people can't.
And exactly those that you've just described so well, Bobby. So I think in America, there's a veterans charity that's set up where neurofeedback is the main intervention that's used for them. And it's used more and more now in treatment clinics, such as, the Priory, etc. Because talking therapy can be exhausting as well. So if you're in for like 5 weeks intensive therapy, neurofeedback is a nice break, and it's doing the job for you too. So,
and I guess you could run it in parallel. Does that happen?
Oh, so many in the US. Most people that do neurofeedback are also some sort of clinical psychologist as well, and they have it as an add-on. Really, I don't have any talking therapy qualifications at all, so I just have, a polite conversation about how you're doing, but I make it really clear that I'm not a talking therapist. And that's the nice thing about working at the Wellbeing clinic, is because there's, others on hand where I can refer to with confidence. Because some people do want the blend, some people don't want to talk about it at all. And that's giving people that option and having another way to help and get to wellness.
Yes, absolutely. So on that sort of trauma situation, there was one very powerful video that I watched. It might have been from that veterans charity in the States, and it was an Afro-Caribbean male who wouldn't be the veterans actually, because he wasn't part of the army. But what he was saying, Fiona, was that he had a very, very abusive childhood. An absent father and a mother that would literally beat him daily. And he reported on one whole summer where he was kept in the basement. Really grueling stuff. It was hard to hear and listen to this man speaking. But he then spoke about how neurofeedback had helped him. He was stuttering. He didn't have any emotional confidence. As a child, he used to wet his bed and so on. So all of these were reasons why, and he was struggling at school. So there were causes for his mum to be really heavy-handed with him. Obviously, there's no excuse for child abuse, but this was the kind of context. But through neurofeedback, he was saying that he almost reclaimed his mental space and experienced a sense of calm and an ability to not be hypervigilant all the time, that sort of physiological arousal that we have, that fight, flight, freeze, flop response that we have when we're in real danger or perceive ourselves to be in danger. Because quite often, the risks are not as great as the mind creates. So this individual was always on hyper alert, but he found that through neurofeedback, he learned to regulate his mental state. And I thought that was, I'm not here to sort of, I'm not sponsored by neurofeedback or neurooptimal trainers or anybody. I'm just a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist. And I think when there's something that's out there that people are saying has helped them, it's important to talk about it, because I think, would that be fair, Fiona, that trying to get traction in the mainstream medicine arena, it sounds as though it's happening, because you've mentioned the Priory, you've mentioned services that are adopting it, but do you think it's still viewed with some sort of suspicion, or not given the status it may need?
Yeah, I think in the UK for sure. I mean,
not in the States.
Not in the States, and in France and Germany, it's really, really popular. I think it is gaining ground, especially with people who have tried maybe traditional things or are looking for something and they can't find their answer and they keep looking. I mentioned the book where people have read the chapter and say, oh, then I've Googled and I've found you. And of course, it's expensive, and we are so used to having a brilliant health service. So if it's not delivered to you, you might think, well, why isn't it part of our health service if it's so good? And I can understand those questions, and that takes a whole different world to get, commissioned as such. So and for me, I just want to let people know it's there, if as another option for others. And I'm so very much like yourself, really. It's just so that people have an informed choice and know that there are other options if the standard hasn't worked for you, or what we see now today is mainstream. But I can imagine that neurofeedback or Neuroptimal will become mainstream within the next 10 years. And I think the trust of technology as well, because you're going to think, what's it doing? Is it putting electricity in my brain, or is it? And it's nothing like that. It's totally safe. It's non-invasive.
Absolutely.
And we are trusting technology so much more as a society now than we did, 10 years ago.
Yes.
And what's it wrong with being, questioning it, etc.
Well, yes. I mean, everything should be peer-reviewed and scrutinised. That's how we kind of get robust with our healthcare. But I think giving it a hearing is really important. And I think you're right. You took the words out of my mouth. It is a non-invasive procedure. There's no chemicals being sort of injected into the body or taken in through tablets. So it doesn't do any harm, but it does seem to help a great deal. Now, with ADHD, I was listening to a psychologist who uses neurofeedback in the States again, and he was saying that one of the main spaces where it seems to help is that it helps people with sleep. So you were saying that about your children, and what he was saying was that sleep deprivation or sleep interruption is so significant a factor in why people with ADHD may struggle to attend or focus or concentrate in the day. And we all know, don't we, that if we've had disrupted sleep, we're actually pretty irritable, impatient, we're moody, more likely to be argumentative, resistant, rigid, and to get sound sleep. So there's something about neurofeedback helping with that. So and actually, I've had a couple of comments come through on Facebook with some of the viewers. So Rinder is watching, and you can read that, Fiona. This is fascinating. Are there any is there any process through which we can raise to, I think it is referred to as delta and higher wave resonance? Is it to listening to an external input, doing a specific breathing exercise, meditation, or focus? Would you like to say anything about that? I don't know enough about neurofeedback to comment, really.
Sure. The neurofeedback I do trains up to 64 hertz, which goes beyond delta. So it will make sure that your delta is fully burned in there as well. But to specifically train one brain wave, I don't do that, because we do it as a dynamical whole brain element. But delta will be trained. But I do believe, is it Joe Dispenza? He works on the pineal gland and training up to that level. Now, I've only read about that, but I'm not expert on it. But I know that his work does look at that higher pineal delta training and demonstrates to people how they can do it. And it's part of the congruent stomach, heart, brain in line to get that delta firing. Right. As far as my work's concerned, though, I just train delta as part of a whole brain activity. That answers your question.
So there might be some more specialist avenues or people that are extending this into different areas and dimensions.
Yeah. For some people are just really, really concentrating on peak performance. And in that area, that's where they're looking at, whereas I'm looking at wellness as a whole, really. So.
Yes. Well, Ravinder's thanking you for that commentary. So that's wonderful. Thanks, Ravinder, for tuning in and asking some questions. So Fiona, let's think about the practicalities then. If somebody is watching or reviews this video, because it will stay on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and so on, so they may come across it in weeks, months, years' time, if not now. If somebody is looking at neurofeedback for themselves or a member of their family, because it's for children or adults, right?
Absolutely.
Do they need to have in mind how long this process takes? Is there a set number of sessions? Do you want to say a bit about that? The practical access.
If you just want to have a quick tune-up, you're feeling a little bit low, whatever, you need to be looking at least 10 sessions. If there's something significant, like how I've described my children, you're probably looking at 50. I can't give you a precise number because our brains will change at different rates, etc. But I think it's really worth, and thanks for the question, Bobby, because it's really worth people knowing that it's a time and financial commitment to start, really. As I said, you can try one session. It's going to only give you more information to understand whether or not it's going to be helpful for you, or whether you like the actual process. And the process itself is you sit in a comfortable chair and put some sensors on you with conductive pace. It's medical grade stuff that you'd have in an EEG, and you listen to music through some earphones. That's simply it. And if you've got a child that's really hard to sit for 30 minutes, we can put things on instead of the music. We can put, a Peppa Pig video on, or whatever it is that would keep that child seated for 30 minutes. We can override that music because, as I mentioned before, it's the interruptions in the music, which is the feedback. So the music can be anything you like, really. But we do have some really nice default music for you to listen to. And that's, specifically composed by a Grammy Award winning, as Neuroptimal will keep reminding us. And it's really nice to listen to. And I've noticed that when, say, adults have come to me and they've done 20 sessions, they feel great, high pressure jobs or anxiety or whatever.
Yeah.
They then download that music, and it works as a bit of a trigger. Just it's not giving them neurofeedback, but it brings them back to that moment where they were relaxed and that they're associated with that music too. So although that's not neurofeedback, it's well worth relaxing to a repeating piece of music that gets you in that zone. So when you hear it again, you get back into that moment. So that's something that I always let people know it's an option to them, which is easily done for them.
Yeah. In your experience, what's the longevity of positive effects? So if people have a number of sessions, they experience some benefits, how lasting are those benefits in your experience?
Well, it depends on what it is that they're going for. For instance, I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a lady that came to me with PTSD after being run over. She was physically fine, but now she couldn't cross the road, and it was taking her ages to take her children to school because she was very avoiding busy roads, etc. And she wanted to learn to drive. So she probably came to see me for a year.
Yeah,
that was probably 45 sessions, really. So it's a big chunk of time.
Almost weekly then. Yeah.
Almost weekly, absolutely. So you could have speeded it up and rented a system and done it in 2 months. But she wanted to come and work through because she was doing other therapies as well to help her through.
Yeah.
And she stopped doing those after 3 months because of commitments, etc. So it's lasted her whole life since then, because now she's learned to drive, and she's texted me, it's probably 18 months ago now, with a joking emoji saying, I just ran across a road and I got to the other side and I thought, oh my word, I can't believe I've just done that. Dodging the traffic the way we shouldn't do it, but the way she would have been before that. So I imagine that's going to be long lasting. If she gets into another situation again, it may well trigger, but a few much lower number of sessions will get her back to being there because the brain will remember it. Yes. So it should last for as long as life. However, life does throw other traumas in our way, and that another trauma close to it could put us off center, but it doesn't take much to tune up to get back into it again. So yeah, I wouldn't expect.
Very hopeful. Yeah, it's very hopeful. So if anybody would like to avail of neurofeedback or give it an experience or even have a chat with Fiona, as Fiona was saying, she does offer services through Solihull Wellbeing Clinic. We're here in Hall Green in Birmingham, actually, in spite of the name. You can find us on the internet through solihullwellbeingclinic.com. And as you probably are tuning in, we've got a very active Facebook, YouTube, Twitter channel. You may find us on LinkedIn as well. So come on through. Fiona has a profile on the website. You can read a bit more about her. And she also has written an article specifically around ADHD and neurofeedback, and that's available on our website as well. If anybody would like a link to it, just drop us a message. Our email is info@solihullwellbeingclinic.com. You can find that on the website as well. So Fiona, I just wanted to wrap up for this evening. We did start a little late, and we'd sort of intended to have a much more snazzy presentation, but because of technical issues, we've kind of gone to a more basic format. But the most important thing really is the content, isn't it? Not the packaging. So
absolutely.
But I wanted to thank you for your time and taking the evening out to talk to people, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. Lovely to chat to you, Bobby.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody. We meet every Thursday evening. 6 p.m. is our usual start time. Next week, we're going to be talking to somebody from Asperger's Heroes, somebody who has suffered with Asperger's syndrome themselves, but also is now supporting people with Asperger's syndrome in the local area. That's David Derbyshire. He's going to be talking to us. The week after that, we are going to be having somebody who performs hijama cupping. Hijama cupping is a particular form of cupping therapy. Cupping therapy became very famous during the Olympics, where athletes were getting treatments for strains and muscle aches and so on and so forth. So I would like to explore hijama cupping with Mispa, who will be coming and talking to us about her training and her skills. She trains people in hijama too. And there'll be other sessions that we run. So do follow us on Facebook, and you'll keep hearing about what we're doing. Thank you again. Good evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you. Bye-bye.